The title of the exhibition, Wayfinding, was my nod at this idea of how we navigate ourselves and how we are navigated through spaces. And sometimes that can be urban spaces. And I think of wayfinding as the tools that we recognize, the signage we recognize that moves us through an airport or a busy, congested place, or navigating us through our highway systems and urban environments. But I also think that there's ways that we can be moved through landscape or moved through spaces that are less about terms and direct references. But my interest in it is that there's a whole science to how humans find their way through spaces. And we're finding more and more that if you see a red arrow, you may not walk that way. So there's some really generic ideas about wayfinding, but I love thinking about how those lay over our natural instincts of navigating. This idea that there's a way that you really do take stock of a place and become embedded in a place. It seems like a goal in a lot of ways, and I didn't think about it as intently until I read The Nan Shepherd, The Living Mountain, which to me was the first indication of maybe how naive I was to the idea of truly embedding into a landscape. The Living Mountain really kicked off a lot of the things I thought about for this exhibition, and it's just a slim little book. It's such a poetic way of thinking about a landscape that she intrinsically knew in her bones. In 12 chapters, she somehow makes you understand that a voyage into a landscape that you know intimately could really be a voyage just into yourself. Some of the things that happen in the show or in wayfinding in terms of the gathering or the curiosities come from learning how to be in a landscape really closely, how to forage for things and how to think about tools and ways, how to make your own tools. So there's more of a hands-on interest that I have in landscape now than I've ever had before, and that I can contribute to being a mother, but also contribute to living through a pandemic. The idea of weaving for me always references back to a comfort and a universal comfort. There's something about a weaving that makes me think of a blanket across an elderly person's lap in the same way that I think about maybe a weaving or a blanket being in an infant's crib. There's these moments that I think it's a universal feeling of comfort to see a blanket. And so that's how the weaving presents itself to me. What I like about the idea of weaving is that there's such a history to it in our culture and many other cultures. So I find that we do relate to it in different ways. And that to me is the sort of the moment of optimism in the show. For this show, for Wayfinding, I became really attracted to this material, which is a hay baling orange. And it felt like this material did a lot of things for me, and it had a color that I felt was very unusual. And it also related back to its function, which is that it's this very strong, durable material. A friend of mine has a farm, and they started sending me bales of leftover of this leftover material, and I found it to be so beautiful and itself to have a sculptural element. So there was the choice of blue and red, and I went back and forth struggling between how those played together, but I love the connotations that red and blue can give. The ones that I think of immediately are water tanks versus gas tanks and how those two are in opposition to each other. So I'm always sort of looking for that rub in the work where you might have a moment of comfort or feel the comfort, and then you're still set off guard a little bit by the understanding that there may be danger, or there may be some other things behind the corner. So I think the color choices play into that for wayfinding. So a lot of the materials that I use in the show may have a second life after this. They may work into a different kind of sculpture or a different kind of piece. I find that, like so many things, it's just a relationship between materials, and I enjoy that part of sculpting. That is my favorite part, probably, is finding these connections between materials and meanings. So some of the objects in the show are tools that I've worked with for the last couple of years, and I'm thinking about them as extensions of the body. Some of them feel like the mallet feels to me just like it's emulating the fist and the arm. It feels like there's a moment where we can relate with a mallet because we understand the motion of that. And then other tools like a ladder or a crutch, they feel like they're augmenting the body in different ways. Some of them speak to direct references of what we need to be in the landscape, or things that some of them have more of a connotation of attaining in my mind. The exaggerated size of them speaks to that a little bit. The feeling that some of the tools could themselves be animated in some ways or become stand-ins for the human figure altogether with the scale. So those things I think are playing throughout the work, and macro and micro moments that I am interested in. I do feel like it's important for me to have my hand on every part of the project. So I generally feel like all parts of the sculptures and the pieces for the installations have to be reworked by me in some way. So even if I'm going to use a straight pin to hang a piece on the wall, I'm probably going to need to dip that in flock, or I'm probably going to need to paint that my own shade of a certain color. That's tiny little details are really where I think the work comes alive for me in different ways. I also am very interested in moments where I might read a text or think of something, think of a story that I'm particularly touched by, and then it can lead me to an immediate visual that then gets produced in the studio and then is able to come into a project. For this body of work, I hope there is a consideration of how you find yourself in a landscape and what your responsibility is. Are you being a good ancestor? That is a question that comes up for me all the time. Am I being a good steward? Am I holding tight to my own principles about how I want other people to live on our planet? And sometimes I know that I'm not. Sometimes I know that it's convenience and there's those moments. But in the studio, I feel like I have more control of that. And I think that is the lasting question I have, is how a viewer walks away and thinks about how they themselves engage landscape and their environment.